So here we are in the middle of September. 30 days till the heat's gone, right? Rumor has it. So this month we are continuing with our series called Our Ever-Changing World. And in it, we have been looking at the idea of alchemy, that ancient practice of changing one thing into something else. And the ancient practice, of course, was trying to change lead into gold. And we're not sure that ever worked. But spiritually, we can look at that idea of changing thoughts into form. We talk about that it always starts as everything on our planet started first with an idea, with a thought that was then eventually put into form. So we started off the month with talking about changing chaos into order. Now I think we're still experiencing a little bit of chaos stuff around here with some of our AV things. We thought we had it worked out last week, but we talked about how the world and the universe is really an orderly system. And we see that demonstrated around us in nature, in the cosmos, even in our own human bodies. We see that order. And that sometimes it's maybe us with our thinking, our perspectives, our perceptions, our beliefs that create some of that drama and chaos in our own lives. And then last week we talked about moving from resistance into allowing. And we said that Spirit can only do for us what we allow Spirit to do through us. And that's a very powerful practice with us. So we're going to continue this week to explore the universal truths and proven practices and principles of the science of mind as we become the alchemists of our own life. The alchemists in our own life. Our talk today is moving from separation to harmony. Now, you might think, okay, those two words don't go together. It should be separation to connection, right? But separation to harmony. Harmony is a powerful word in the science of mind, which our founder, the author of the Science of Mind, Dr. Ernest Holmes, wrote that book. He's the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living. And he had a lot to say about harmony throughout that book, which he wrote originally in 1926 and then rewrote in 1936. And he talked a lot about it in his last talks, which is in the book, the Ernest Holmes Papers, in the 50s and early 1960. So harmony was important. He tells us that the secret of all progress is getting into a right relationship with the universal. How many have heard of that movie, The Secret? That was all about the law of attraction, right? Well, Ernest Holmes is saying the secret to progress is getting in right relationship with the universal, getting into alignment with that. In tune with the infinite order. In tune with the infinite order is harmony. Accepting the underlying laws of creation and moving in its mighty rhythm in harmony. Those underlying laws of creation, of course, are what we teach with the seed, the soil, the plant, the thought, the law, and then the manifestation, right? So we get in alignment with that. And he says that such harmony adjusts our affairs and enriches our lives. Isn't that powerful? Adjusts our affairs and enriches our lives when we're in that flow and in that harmony. So harmony, the word, comes from the Greek root meaning fitting together. Fitting together. And it's a combination of elements that come together in the whole. Now, we typically think of harmony in music, right? Where we've got all those various notes coming together to form those chords and melodies and so forth. If you've ever been to the symphony, you've heard that symphony of different instruments come together. If you got there a little bit early, what did you hear? Wow, what are they doing up there, right? Everybody's tuning their horns and getting ready to go and making lots of noise, and it sounds kind of messy. But then the conductor comes in, and all of a sudden, they all have that one note. It's beautiful, isn't it? That's the harmony that starts. That's the harmony. So how does that apply to us in our lives? Well, we've talked a lot about those 5 areas of our life: our career, finance, relationship, health, and spirituality. So that fitting together of all of those components and areas of our life would be harmony, right? That would be harmony. So we can't live in harmony, though, if one of those areas is we're out of alignment, out of integrity, out of balance. Maybe we are not making healthy choices in our food and what we're eating. And we all know how we eat when we eat something that doesn't necessarily serve us, something perhaps with lots of grease or carbs or many of those sugars, maybe some of those things. We don't feel so good afterwards, do we? Our body's not kind of in balance at that moment. But we know how we feel, so it's hard to be in alignment and balance and harmony when we make those choices. It could be that we're in a career that's not rewarding, not fulfilling, not empowering. And we can't just carve those little areas out and go, I'm just going to ignore that, I'm not going to deal with that, everything else is going fine. Because what happens? It begins to gnaw at us, doesn't it? Begins to just work our subconscious, and there's just that something we're not quite happy about in our life. Until we have to make those changes. We have to do something to shift that back into alignment. If you've ever driven a car out of alignment or out of balance with the tires, it's hard to drive, isn't it? It kind of wants to go its own direction and stuff. We need to pull it back into alignment, back into harmony. And sometimes that realigning is not a fun trip, is it? Not always a fun trip to do that. It may involve releasing something. It may involve some sort of a breakup in a job or a breakup in a relationship. Or it could be that we've got to receive something, maybe a gym membership. In tune with infinite order to achieve peace in our life is what Ernest Holmes says. In tune with infinite order. So he goes on to say in another quote in The Science of Mind that the unity of the spirit is kept through the bonds of peace. The unity of spirit is kept through the bonds of peace. Other than peace suggests confusion and separation. The spirit is a perfect unit, and we harmonize with this unity when we maintain a state of peace in our minds. We harmonize with this unity when we maintain a state. That resonates as true, doesn't it? We may not understand all those words and exactly how that goes together, but it resonates as true that when we maintain a state of peace in our mind, we're in that unity with spirit. So why do we sometimes feel so unpeaceful, out of sorts, disconnected, maybe even disconnected from source? Alone, abandoned, forsaken. Well, we know that's not possible, right? Because spirit lives within each and every one of us, in, through, and as us, expressing as us. But sometimes we do get ourselves disconnected. We do get ourselves disconnected from that divine harmony that is truly our inherent nature. Because that's who we are. We are spirit in form, and we have come forth to be that divine harmony and to have all these wonderful experiences in the physical realm that kind of get us off kilter sometimes. We get to experience and grow through those. That's really the fun part, is the growing through those, right? When we look back on them, 20/20 hindsight, not when we're in them, though, right? Yeah, not so much fun then. So as I'm looking at all this idea of discord, because that's what we're talking about, right? When we're unpeaceful and not in alignment, we're kind of talking about discord. March of 2001, I was watching some news clip on the computer, and I remember gasping because I was so taken aback by what I was seeing. And they were showing a news clip from Afghanistan, someplace that I was not familiar with at that time. And they were showing these military-type vehicles, tanks and things, attacking these ancient Buddhist statues. And the news clip was that the Taliban was destroying these 4th and 5th century Buddhist statues, 165 feet tall, carved into sandstone mountains. They were destroying them because they did not align with their faith. And I remember sitting there and watching that and going, that's so out of order and out of alignment and discordant. And just feeling that at such a deep level, I mean, it would be like destroying the pyramids in Egypt. To me, it felt that way, because these are works of art, antiquities from ancient times, irreplaceable, being destroyed. And I remember feeling that out of balance and discord and thinking to myself, actually saying out loud, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well. And of course, we all know what happened in September of 2001. We honored that last week. So these ideas of discordant things that happen that impact us, that's on a huge scale. That is on a massive international planetary scale when something like that happens. But what about in our own life? What about in our own life when something discordant happens and touches us and that bell goes off within us that goes, no, this is not right. This is not in alignment with truth. This is not in balance. This is not in the harmonic expression of the divine through us as God beings that we are. What do we do then? Do we address it? Do we try to be that place of peace and wholeness in addressing that? Or do we do like last week we talked about and go into that resistance thing? You know, pushing against is putting energy on that, so we can't push against it. So what can we do? How can we be that God presence in that moment of recognizing a discordant thought, a discordant action, activity that's happening in front of us, and be with that, and be in our truth, and be in our wholeness? Ernest Holmes, our founder, again, he suggests that much of the confusion that we see in the world today is because of a belief in duality which supposes that evil is equal to good. Supposes that evil is equal to good and that God and the devil divide the kingdom of truth. And he says this is a false idea. And that was an interesting idea to play with around this topic of harmony today. And the thought of evil. And I've had many conversations, discussions over the past 15 years with people about the idea of evil and does it exist? And there's lots of things we can point at and say, yep, that's evil. That's the devil. And yet, in our teaching, God is all there is. There is nothing else. God is all there is. And in that goodness and in that godness, it cannot recognize anything not like itself. Now, can we misuse the law and create destruction of statues and things? Absolutely we can. Because we have freedom of choice. We have freedom of will. We can do these things. We can misuse the law at any juncture that we want to. But we will be out of harmony. We will be discordant. And there will be effects of those causes set in motion, right? Because that's what we see all around us. Cause, effect, cause, effect. It's actually easier in some cases to think about teaching that idea of the God outside of us, the guy in the sky, and then the other evil nemesis, and they're always fighting for our souls. That's kind of an easy story to tell because we've got every cartoon and video game and sci-fi movie out there is kind of telling that story, isn't it? Good versus evil, and good's going to win eventually and defeat evil. It's an ancient story. It resonates with us as human beings, with that light and that dark, that good, that bad. But yet, isn't all of that really wrapped up in some form of judgment, opinion? We've had this conversation before where we look at something and call it bad today, but then it becomes good tomorrow. It's the Tao story of the farmer and his son. We've shared that many times. It was good that he broke his leg because he didn't get off to war. But it looked bad at the time. It looked bad at the time. So we just don't know. But how do we be in it without being so miserable about it? How do we be in it? How do we be in it? Holmes tells us the truth is simple, direct, and always self-evident. Again, it's that resonating, sounding bell within us that we know the truth is true. It's like that quote earlier about the adjusting our affairs and enriching our lives when we're in harmony. We just know that, don't we? We just feel that because we know that that truth is true. And we know that most everything is goodness. And then there's those things that go against the grain that are not, that do not feel that harmony and that balance for us. So once we get that God is all there is, and there's not two powers that are fighting, once we get that God is all there is, then we can begin to understand the concept of wholeness, of oneness, of that unity that we talk about. We can begin to understand that within that idea of oneness. Because then we begin to see that we are in that symphony of life, contributing our own individual musical note to that symphony to play that beautiful music unfolding. Now, I have always thought, and I've actually used the example the past 2 weeks, I think, that our human body is a wonderful example, wonderful metaphor for how oneness in individuality, multiplicity, all of those things come together. Because it can be hard to get our minds around this sometimes. So if we think about our human body, we've got bajillions of cells. I don't know how many, but a lot, right? And within that, we've got brain cells, hair cells, skin cells, heart cells, right? All these different specialized cells that have their individual consciousness and know exactly what to do. And we've got blood cells. We've got red blood cells and white blood cells, right? And the red blood cells are like little semis, loaded up trailer trucks. And they are in the lungs, and they receive a shipment of oxygen, and then they go flying throughout the body and deliver that oxygen to every place in the body that needs it. They pick up the carbon dioxide that nobody needs in the body. They bring that back to the lungs, and the lungs expel it. That just happened. Is that amazing? That just happened. And then the white blood cells, of course, are our immune system that protect us against infectious diseases and foreign invaders. That's like our internal security system, right? Our internal security system. But if I prick my finger and a drop of blood comes out, it looks like just a drop of blood, right? We'd have to get our microscopes out to start to see the differences in what's in there in those white and those red cells. But to the eye, to us, it appears like a drop of blood, just one drop. So all of the cells of the body are different and unique in their activities. And they work most of the time in harmony with each other, don't they? To do the jobs that they're meant to do. Imagine if the brain cells one day decided, we're not letting you red blood cells in anymore. We don't like your semi-trailers. We just don't like those big tires. You're not coming in anymore. Sounds silly, doesn't it? Well, we have this little conflict on the Gaza Strip with Palestinians and Israelis, and isn't that what we've done? We've built a wall in the oneness, in the wholeness. End of World War II, Berlin, the city was split with a wall until the 80s. We built that, we separated the wholeness of a city. And are we seeing this even on our southern border today? The oneness, the wholeness of who and what we are. Separation. So we are like the cells in the body of God. How about that? We are like the cells in the body of God, individualized, unique, and infused with intelligence and moving in harmony of life, usually. Usually. So I've got a couple of examples to help us maybe understand this beyond the body. Another example, aspen trees. I didn't grow up with aspen trees on the East Coast. We don't have them back there. But when I came out west and I started learning about aspen trees, they're fascinating. That they are typically they grow in clonal colonies, which means they're genetically identical. And they're derived from a single seedling. So I had this really beautiful picture. Imagine in your eye, if you will, an aspen forest. And it's in a meadow-like setting, the white bark of the trees, all of the yellow golden leaves. Got the picture? Okay, all of those trees are from the exact same seedling, same source. But when we look at that forest of all those individual trees, they look separate, don't they? Just like we look separate to each other in our physical beingness. And yet, they all, if we look underground, they all come from the same seedling. They share the same root system. And we know in our quantum sciences that we are all connected in that one as well. We're all in vibration together. So the aspen tree is a wonderful metaphor for this idea of what we see is not always true. Because we see the individual expressions of those aspen trees, yet it's one root system. It is one root system. So they're constantly evolving because as the trees will live 40 to 150 years, but the root system lives thousands. So they're considered old growth forests. I did say thousands. Thousands of years. And as the surface trees die off, new ones sprout to keep that forest going, to keep that body whole. Isn't that a wonderful metaphor for us and our connectivity from the one source and how we look individual, yet we're also connected. We're also connected at the core. So how can we apply our science of mind principles to this idea, this beautiful dance of moving from fear and separation into this harmony with life? How can we use science of mind? Because we're all about application, right? We've got to apply this. And so I want to look at we can't look at them. We're not going to look at them. I'm going to tell you about them, and then you'll, gee, you're just going to have to go to the website to get them this week. All right, and we'll put them up on the website this afternoon. So our first practice would be, who knows that show, what was it, Want to Be a Millionaire? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Have you ever seen that? And that funny line in there, call a lifeline, right? They had that one thing that you could call a lifeline, call somebody outside of the set to get assistance on whatever question they had asked. That idea has become part of our vernacular, hasn't it? Call a lifeline. Well, that's what I'm going to suggest to you as our first point is call a lifeline. When you're feeling discordant, when you're feeling out of sorts, call a friend who will hear you and help you remember who you are. Call one of our prayer practitioners. They're available to you for prayer. Allow them to see, know, and claim the wholeness of who and what you are, coming back into alignment, back into that harmony. Call a lifeline. The second idea, we've used this quote before from Howard Thurman, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. My high resolve. I hope that this day, today, Sunday mornings, is a moment of high resolve for you. It is for me, and it's that higher vibration of being in alignment with spirit. Keep fresh before me those. Keep fresh before me my vision of my highest vision of my life. How do we do that? Well, we have these wonderful cell phones that have so many tools available to us. You can keep books, uplifting material, affirmations, videos. You can search the web for positive and inspiring quotations and stories and things. You can also use it as a telephone to call that lifeline. It's basically creating your own emergency kit. You probably have one in your house. You may have one in your car. If you're a camper, I know you've got one in your camping supplies. First aid kit for your soul, for your spiritual journey, to keep us aligned, because we get so much input everywhere. Television, media, driving down the road on billboards, newspaper, print, magazines, grocery store line, right? Any and everywhere. We get so much negative input. We have to offset that. So carry your emergency kit with you to pour in the good stuff, to keep that vibration, to keep that spiritual awareness up in your life, to stay in that higher plane. Stay in that higher plane. And then third, I think you've heard this one time before, stay in the one, do your spiritual practices. That's how we set the table for our days, doing our spiritual practices so that we get ourselves into that alignment with Source and that alignment with what is true about us. And it sets the tone for our day going forward. And just like getting enough rest, good food, exercise, and rewarding work, it's important that we do our meditation and affirmative prayer, because those are your tools of alchemy. That's how you transform things, is using these spiritual tools that we provide. So I would like to close today with a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. And he says that we are here to awaken from the illusion of separateness. He says that's our whole purpose for being here, is to awaken from this illusion of separateness, that we are separate from each other. And just remember, it is an illusion just like the aspen trees. It may look like we're separate, but we share the same source. We share the same source. So I would invite you to go within with me right now as we join in prayer to anchor this and to remember who and what we are. How good it is to come together this morning in celebration of life, as we recognize that there is only one power, one presence, one infinite source of all that is, and that is God. It is Spirit, it is Source. It is that divine intelligence. It is the power that holds our planets. It is the seasons. It is the very breath that breathes each one of us and beats our hearts. It is life itself expressing through its creation, which is each of us individualized and unique in that form, yet originated from that same source, from that power and that presence of God itself. And that creative energy of life that pulsates through each one of us. And in this knowing, I speak my word for and about each one of us, knowing that whatever may be on our hearts this day that is seeking support, that is seeking enlightenment, that we lift that into this prayerful time now, knowing, claiming, and accepting the full manifestation of that as we believe, knowing that it is done unto us as we believe. So we lift that, knowing the wholeness of each individual here, the perfection, the divinity, the intelligence, the wisdom, and the fact that each one is an expression of divine love. So how grateful I am for this knowing, for this truth, for the manifestation of this prayer, for I know that it's already done. It is already so. It's already been accomplished in the mind of God. We just simply await its manifestation in form through our lives. So I let it be, I let it go, and we anchor in this truth together by proclaiming, and so it is.